Happy Friday, everyone. It's a beautiful day here in Seoul, and you've tuned into Arirang News. I'm Lee Ji-yoon. Amid growing anticipation over the summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump, the New York Times has reported that President Trump had ordered the Pentagon to work on reducing the number of American troops stationed here in South Korea. Seoul's top office has denied the report, while the U.S. Defense Department also said that it has not received such orders. Meanwhile, reports have also been coming out on how North Korea may be releasing the 3 American detainees soon, and eyes are on how this could affect the upcoming Kim-Trump meeting. And before I sit down with an expert to talk more about this, let's first check on what's making the headlines at this hour with our Devin Whiting at the News Center. Devin?
Hi, Ji-yoon. Yes, expectations that North Korea is about to release those 3 Americans it's been holding in labor camps. Expectations are growing. President Trump's lawyer and former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani told Fox News on Thursday that Pyongyang is letting the 3 go, in fact, today. Giuliani's remarks come after a tweet from President Trump hinting at their release and reports that they've been relocated from a labor camp to a hotel near Pyongyang. And here's the White House spokesperson reacting to that comment.
As Mayor Giuliani stated, and I'll refer you back to his comments, this was information that the president didn't know at the time, but eventually learned. We give the very best information that we have at the time.
The Trump administration has long been demanding the North release the prisoners, Kim Dong-chul, Tony Kim, and Kim Hak-song. Sanders said that while the White House can't confirm the validity of any of the reports currently out, the U.S. would see it as a sign of goodwill if the Americans were set free. South Korea's defense ministry has organized a task force to carry out the terms of the Panmunjom Declaration signed at the Inter-Korean Summit last week. A South Korean military official told Arirang News Friday that the task force is led by Defense Minister Song Young-moo and is made up of key defense ministry officials and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as defense experts. The team is also preparing for inter-Korean military talks, including a meeting of generals from both sides slated for later this month. As stipulated in the Panmunjom Declaration, the team is aiming to remove the propaganda loudspeakers along the inter-Korean border by the end of this weekend. China's foreign minister met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Thursday. Wang Yi said China welcomes the success of last week's inter-Korean summit, and Beijing wants to strengthen cooperation with Pyongyang in every respect. Possibly a sign China wants to play a bigger role in the changes happening on the Korean peninsula. Oh Jung-hee has more.
China hopes to strengthen communication and cooperation with North Korea in every aspect of resolving the issues on the Korean peninsula. That's what Chinese Foreign Minister and State Councilor Wang Yi told North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Thursday. Congratulating him on the success of last week's inter-Korean summit, Wang said, the summit has brought opportunities for a political solution on the peninsula. He added that China backs the 2 Koreas' transition from an armistice agreement to a peace treaty. He also said that China welcomes North Korea's policy shift toward economic development and that Beijing backs Pyongyang's attempts to resolve its security concerns and wants to strengthen communication and cooperation with the North. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un responded that Pyongyang will strengthen strategic communication with Beijing. Saying that achieving denuclearization on the Korean peninsula is North Korea's firm will, Kim said that meaningful changes have been taking place and they'll help peacefully solve issues on the Korean peninsula. He emphasized that Pyongyang hopes to build mutual trust through dialogue to eliminate the root cause of conflict. This is the first visit to Pyongyang by a Chinese foreign minister in 11 years. China is seen as trying to solidify its position in negotiations regarding the Korean peninsula, as last Friday's Panmunjom Declaration left open the possibility of China's exclusion from future talks. The agreement between Seoul and Pyongyang stipulated that ensuring peace on the Korean peninsula could be discussed either trilaterally with the U.S. or through 4-way talks with the U.S. and China. Wang had met with North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho on Wednesday and stressed that China will continue to play a, quote, positive role in resolving issues on the Korean peninsula. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's unification ministry said Friday that Seoul's view is that China can, in fact, take part in possible 3- or 4-way talks on replacing the Korean War armistice agreement with a peace treaty. However, Unification Minister Cho Myung-gyun clarified that does not mean those talks require Beijing to take part, refuting earlier reports that said China would have to be a principal party. The armistice formalizing a ceasefire between the two Koreas was signed in 1953 by 3 parties: the UN Command, North Korea, and China. On the issue of denuclearizing the Korean peninsula, Minister Cho said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un mentioned that the details of the regime's denuclearization will be discussed during his summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. Cho also said the South Korean government will work hard to ensure that summit is a success. Speaking of a peace treaty, it was the Inter-Korean summit a week ago that really raised hopes of that becoming a reality. But it's not something the Koreas can do on their own, since there were other parties to the conflict, the China question being a prime example. As our Kim Mo-kyun explains, a formal peace isn't as simple as it might first look.
At the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit last month, South Korean President Moon Jae-in and his North Korean counterpart Kim Jong-un declared to the world that there will be no more war on the Korean peninsula, reaffirming their willingness to head towards a new era of peace. In the Panmunjom Declaration, the two leaders vowed to officially declare the end of the Korean War by the end of this year and work to replace the current 65-year-long armistice with a peace treaty. However, this needs not just the approval of the two Koreas, but also of the other parties involved in the original armistice agreement. In 1953, the Korean War had been temporarily halted with an armistice agreement, which was signed by representatives from the U.S.-led United Nations Command, North Korea, and China. But it wasn't signed by a representative from South Korea, as then-President Lee Seung-man opposed the idea. As so, the two Koreas need the approval of the other two signatories in order to sign a peace treaty, which signals the beginning of exchanges and cooperation in various sectors. Many experts expect the process to first begin with a declaration of the end of the war between the two Koreas, which will be followed by the participation of the U.S., and finally the signing of the peace treaty together with the U.S. and China. With a long journey awaiting the two neighbors, it seems like the key to achieving prosperity and peace on the peninsula will depend on how the signatories judge the North Korean leader's words, especially on his willingness to denuclearize.
The most important thing here is North Korea's willingness to denuclearize. If North Korea strategically decides to give up its nuclear power, the upcoming talks between its leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump will end successfully, which will directly lead to the declaration of the end of war.
If the treaty gets signed, there could be drastic changes on the Korean peninsula, ranging from North Korea's arms control to its expansion of diplomatic relations with other nations.
The current compulsory military service we have in South Korea could be changed to a voluntary service. The fundamental security structure of Seoul, Washington, Tokyo versus Pyongyang, Beijing, Moscow will also change. Basically, a new security order will be formed in Northeast Asia.
Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
South Korea's Blue House has dismissed reports that claim U.S. President Donald Trump is looking at options to reduce U.S. troop numbers in South Korea. Now, this comes weeks before President Trump's landmark meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Our Kwon Jang-ho has more.
Seoul's presidential office has described reports that U.S. President Donald Trump had requested plans to reduce American troop numbers in South Korea as not true. The Blue House senior press secretary Yoon Young-chang released a statement on Friday saying that President Moon's national security advisor Chung Eui-yong, currently in Washington to meet with his U.S. counterparts, had discussed this report with a key member of the U.S. National Security Council who flatly dismissed it as groundless. The U.S. Defense Department also said it has not received any orders to withdraw troops from the Korean Peninsula and is maintaining the same posture in the region. The New York Times on Thursday quoted several unnamed officials who said Trump had ordered the Pentagon to draw up such plans. The review is said not to be intended as a bargaining chip for North Korea's denuclearization in Trump's upcoming summit with Kim Jong-un, but it is being considered as an option if a peace treaty on the Korean Peninsula is reached. Although the sources declined to confirm whether Trump was considering a full withdrawal, they said it was unlikely. Trump has long criticized the cost of stationing the 28,500 troops in South Korea, saying that Seoul needs to pay more towards those costs. In March, he even suggested during a fundraising speech that he wanted to pull out troops in exchange for balancing out the trade deficit. Currently, South Korea pays around $820 million a year towards troop costs, about half of the total cost of stationing U.S. forces on the peninsula. But that amount is expected to increase, with Seoul and Washington currently in negotiations over a new deal. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
And to tell us more about the issues surrounding U.S. troops in South Korea, as well as American detainees in North Korea, Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung University joins us in the studio today. Hello, Professor.
Good to be here. Thank
All
you.
right, so like we just heard, the Blue House has dismissed a New York Times report that said that supposedly President Trump ordered the Pentagon to come up with options to perhaps reduce the number of U.S. troops here in South Korea. Now, what can we make of this, and how do you think the New York Times got to even reporting this then?
Well, in the article, it says the sources, several people debriefed this matter. So it does not name any officials at this point. And the article also states that some officials have denied the report altogether.
Okay.
So there has been talks, but ever since the report came out, all sides, including Blue House, Donald Trump, and the Pentagon all deny this report. So probably what we can speculate at this point is that maybe there was an option that they looked into.
Okay.
Or there was a speculation that if the peace treaty goes well, is there a need to maintain the current size of the troops?
Right.
And also, the discussion about the American troops has been about the cost of maintaining the troops. So there are a number of reasons why they might have talked about it.
Right.
But as related to the peace talks going into this, probably not much meat there.
It's interesting because this report came just after President Moon and the Blue House said that the U.S. troops issue is unrelated to the peace treaty. And now we had that report, so I guess it was a very sensitive issue at this moment in time.
Right. If anything, this could be a chip to deal with North Korea, and North Korea has always demanded that the American troops has to pull out in the context of denuclearizing Korean Peninsula. So there's no reason why we should volunteer to reduce the number or eliminate that troop presence.
Right.
So from that point of view, I don't think this report is 100% accurate.
So going along with what you just said, I mean, how has North Korea reacted to the U.S. troops here in South Korea up until now? Right.
It has always been a deal breaker of sort that they demand that the American troops in Korea should pull out. And this is something that China hopes to accomplish too. So there is this block of opinions about this, and that has always hindered the going forward. And it was suspected that North Korea does this or demands this to break off the talks when they are trying to kind of weasel out of free themselves from any kind of commitment. Well, things have changed this time around, hopefully, but I think that's why North Korea does not demand this, and they expressly said that they're not going to put this on the table.
Okay, so you don't think that the U.S. and North Korea, when they meet for the summit in the coming weeks, they're not going to discuss this issue of U.S. troops stationed in South Korea?
Well, knowing Donald Trump, well, not knowing Donald Trump,
right.
that's more exact statement. Anything could happen in terms of big deal if they're planning. Probably it's something that we can contemplate. But I think the normal course of action should be that the peace treaty and some sort of compensation or some kind of collaboration deal. And afterwards, I think that naturally the discussion will rise to the point where the American troops maintaining this size at this point, about 28,000 troops in Korea, may not be necessary given the level of security risks.
So this is going to be one of the details that will probably be discussed after the big picture is kind of announced between the two sides. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the 3 American detainees in North Korea. We have seen reports coming out that North Korea is set to release them or have already released them and have relocated them to a hotel in Pyongyang. We've been hearing several reports on that. So what is the situation like right now with those 3 Americans?
Well, as you know, Donald Trump tweeted about it, Rudolph Giuliani mentioned, but the Pentagon, I mean the State Department has not confirmed the release or any progress in this. But this has been in the works, so to speak, for quite a while. Mike Pompeo pushed this when he visited Pyongyang, and North Korean minister visited Sweden with the speculation that it was one of those agenda that they have talked about. So I think there has been inklings of the progress, and a lot of people, including myself, has mentioned that because of this peace mood, North Korea will take some or show some gesture of detente and a gesture of good intentions, including, especially this involves human rights issues. So we cannot really deal with the North Korean human rights issues outright because it's very serious. But we have always expected that there would be some sort of gesture, including the Americans released or the Japanese abductees getting the good news of some sort. So this is in line of those expectations.
Now, what are the chances that North Korea may actually send these detainees home back to the U.S. before the summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un?
I think that likelihood is pretty high because ever since the New Year's message, Kim Jong-un has completely turned the mood into more peace, more reconciliation. Ever since he announced that the weapons program is all but finished last year. So I think that he will try to promote more of a peace mood going into the talks, and that has an impact of kind of boosting the morale of the talks itself. And already Donald Trump has taken a credit for the progress in this area. So there's no reason not to do it. And doing it afterwards probably not much impact in terms of what focusing on what would happen on the table.
So at this point, like you said, Kim Jong-un has made a series of concessions, perhaps, starting from the agreeing to a complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula to perhaps potentially freeing these 3 American detainees. So what can we make of these recent concessions that Kim Jong-un has made, and what could be his real intentions?
That is a big question mark, and there are speculations abound. I think one possible scenario is that they always wanted to have some sort of deal, some sort of completion or resolution of this deal, and they were waiting for the recognition from the world community that they're the nuclear power, because they can negotiate some sort of concessions from the position of strength. And presumably they did that by announcing last November that they are the nuclear power. So if that's the case, then there's a legitimate reason to kind of speculate that North Korea, that has always been kind of the boy who cried too many times, the wolf, and always whistled out of any kind of the declaration or agreement. This time around, it could be different.
Okay.
So I think that if that's the hopeful scenario, probably this kind of peace mood will lead to not the big betrayal at the end that a lot of skeptics have anticipated, but this time around they will try to reap some sort of economic benefits out of this. And Trump and China and also President Moon Jae-in are the main actors in this, and somebody who can do this, make this happen, including economic reconciliation and easing of the tensions and the sanctions as well. So I think that if I were Kim Jong-un, this is a big chance of lifetime in his young career.
Well, I think there have been doubts because, just like you said, last November, they announced that they're a nuclear power, and Trump and Kim were trading threats of war on the Korean Peninsula. And all of a sudden, we're seeing rapid developments in the Korean Peninsula that, like you said, it seems like we're moving toward peace and reconciliation. So I guess that's why there are still many skeptics over this, but we'll definitely have to see where this Trump-Kim summit leads us and what outcome comes out from that. But at this point, I'm wondering, are there any other foreigners, including South Koreans, that are currently detained in North Korea? I mean, if they are, then what are the reasons for their detainment, and are there any chances that we could see North Korea freeing them as well in the near future?
Right. Not only Americans, there are 6 Koreans, South Koreans, detained there. I think the Unification Ministry has already said that they're making efforts to get them back. And another big thorny point with Japan actually is Japanese abductees.
Right.
They recognize about 17 of them, and North Korea has not been making enough efforts to appease them. So the same kind of logic about the human rights discussions. Probably North Korea would make some kind of gesture, giving them a good news about the whereabouts and the conditions of those people, or actually returning them if they are able. So that's something that Abe has strongly asked Donald Trump to insist on it on the table. So I think some sort of action might be taken.
All right. I mean, it seems likely because we had that successful inter-Korean summit just last week, and we're seeing rapid thawing of ties between the two Koreas. So with those 6 South Korean nationals detained in North Korea, I mean, it seems likely that North Korea might free them even before the Kim-Trump summit.
Right. Along with that, I think we can anticipate more of a feel-good moment with lost families getting together, or some kind of sports event participating together.
As a unified team.
Right.
Yeah. Now, like you said, Japanese abductees issue has been in the spotlight, especially as Japanese Prime Minister Abe has been continuously bringing up this issue with many regional players right now. And we know that family members of the Japanese nationals abducted met with U.S. government officials in Washington on Wednesday and asked for support to bring their loved ones back home. So what are the chances then that something might be agreed upon between Kim Jong-un and Trump when they meet for their summit in regards to this Japanese abductees issue?
Right. I think the chance is good because Abe made a visit specifically for these issues. And I think the speculation is that this is the issue that the Japan could assert to prevent Japan kind of completely excluded from the discussions. I think the human rights issue, abductee issue, is one issue that the Japan could put themselves onto the table and onto the agenda. So because of that, it was important for Abe, important obviously for the families, and Trump was very positive about this. He promised that he will bring this up. So I think the chances are very good that it will be part of the issues. I think that anticipating that, that's why North Korea might take some actions even before that about the abductees. So, but we'll have to see.
Right. Now, it looks like North Korea has been definitely trying to live up to some expectations from the international community by saying that it's going to dismantle the Punggye nuclear site and agreeing to complete denuclearization and potentially freeing these 3 American detainees. I mean, the list goes on. But like you mentioned briefly before, what are some of the humanitarian issues involving North Korea that remains to be solved, and would it be addressed in the near future?
I think the biggest one is lost family issues, separated family issues.
From the Korean War.
Right. And also, the North Korea has gone through the horrendous famine and difficulties in terms of agricultural products and all those. So I think that South Korea is preparing or trying to resume the humanitarian efforts to North, depending on how it progresses. One of the thorny points would be how that will interfere with the sanctions, but most of the sanction measures exclude the humanitarian efforts anyway.
Right.
So the feel-good moments or offerings from the South will also presumably continue.
All right, we'll have to keep our eyes on if those issues will be brought up between Trump and Kim when they meet, because we definitely didn't see too many of them come out from the Inter-Korean Summit. So
Right.
we'll have to keep our eyes on that. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.
And that does it for this edition of Arirang News. But stay tuned for more news updates throughout the day right here on Arirang. Thanks for watching and see you soon.
Don't hold back. Conquer challenges. Draw a brighter world. The next Korea Generation Y.